The Cosmos Dialogue, a core mission of Cosmos Foundation, is intended to be a conversation starter that will lead to healthy discussions and deepen our understanding of some of the most pressing issues of our time.
On behalf of Cosmos Foundation, let me welcome you to this very important and timely dialogue on China's role in the contemporary world. I am Nabila Rahman, and I would personally like to thank each of you for taking the time to attend this extraordinary gathering, especially our distinguished panelists and speakers. It has been very important for Cosmos Foundation to organize a dialogue series as we continue to grow and adapt. Some of you will have attended previous installments on various issues ranging from relations between Bangladesh and the European Union, Bangladesh and UK, Bangladesh and China, to the Rohingya crisis, to bowel music and philosophy. Cosmos Foundation is always open to new ideas that can help transform society and lead to a better future. And your support along this journey is extremely important for us.
On behalf of Cosmos Foundation, I'm happy to say that Cosmos Dialogue and Ambassadors Lectures series, initiated in 2017, are signature projects that have successfully taken off as Foundation looks forward to a brighter future. These dialogues have already created an impact and ripple in Bangladesh and beyond by contributing to opinion building and raising public awareness about the key issues facing the nation and having global ramifications. Today's symposium is very appropriately timed for two compelling reasons. Firstly, as you are aware, our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will be undertaking a trip to China in July. It will definitely represent a prominent milestone in forging our bilateral relations on firmer footing. I do hope the discussion will serve as a curtain raiser to our Prime Minister's historic visit. Secondly, thoughts and ideas emerging from today's dialogue will highlight and underline China's unique role in the present-day world as a rising power and a force to reckon with. China's expanding sphere of influence and dominant role in the world stage is destined to grow further because of the vastness of its territory, abundant resources, size of population, economic clout, that has made it the world's second largest economy, next only to the US, and is poised to overtake the US soon. China's military might, advancement in science and technology, its geopolitical strategic location, and its status as a permanent member of the United UN Security Council have also boosted its international image. In the reversal of its past role based on an inward-looking and isolationist stance of hide your strength, bide your time, and never take a lead. China has now adopted a pragmatic and outward-looking policy, setting its sight on a worldview, actively asserting its interests and shaping its destiny. Most of the economic gains being made by China are filtering down to the bottom layer to foster an inclusive, just and equitable society. Committed to fostering the environment and containing the greenhouse gas emission, China has become the world's renewable energy superpower, setting an example for other countries to replicate. Despite China's impressive array of military hardware, which is intended as a deterrent rather than for attack, China believes in using its soft power and charms offensive in the resolution of disputes and conflicts through negotiation and diplomacy. Home to the world's one of the oldest civilizations, China is a treasure trove of cultural heritage, architectural splendors, natural wonders, and a rich repository of history at different stages of China's development.
The backdrop of this particular event is very significant. The Honorable Prime Minister, as you have heard, is traveling to Dalian in China first week of July. This would be a World Economic Forum event, which is called the Summer Davos, but it will also take her to Beijing. Now, we are absolutely positive that this will further widen and deepen the already close bilateral relations that exist between China and Bangladesh. The Chinese ambassador has regretted he was not able to come for other pressing engagements, also in connection with the Prime Minister's visit. But not so long ago, in this very room, he had put forward some key ideas to strengthen relations across a very broad spectrum of cultural and economic exchange, security, people's connectivity, and as good partners on the basis of equality and mutual trust. So, our symposium today is very well timed. Now, for over a decade now, from my current perch in Singapore, I've been able to watch and follow from rather close quarters China's rise. The Chinese say it's peaceful. Indeed, there has been an internal debate in the Chinese system as to whether the concept of peaceful rise, or Heping Jueche, should constitute a major policy doctrine. Ultimately, it was settled in favor of even a less ambitious expression, peaceful development. Till this very moment, China has not actually involved itself in an armed conflict abroad. Just as actually many, many years ago, Chairman Mao had said to Edgar Snow that China is not involved in foreign conflicts. A very important factor in not just Chinese but in global politics has been the phenomenal rise as a leader of President Xi Jinping. His thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era has marked the beginning of a unique dawn in history. The idea is to transform China into a moderately prosperous society by 2020, a great modern socialist country by 2035, and a superpower by 2049, the 100th anniversary of the revolution. In China, under the stewardship of President Xi Jinping, a new mantra has been launched, and this is the China Dream, or Shunguomeng, as it's said in Mandarin. It has been seen by analysts as comprising three main elements, the China Dream. One, a new kind of big power relations with the United States. Two, a win-win relationship, a very key expression, 双赢 in Chinese, with partners, whether competitive entities or strategic allies. And 3, stimulating local demand to boost the economy on the backdrop of stable growth. The Belt and Road Initiative, of which we will probably have some discussions this morning, or the BRI as it is called, perhaps flows from this China dream. You have the China dream, and the BRI is something that comes out of it. Now, the concept BRI merits a broader definition. It is a $1 trillion economic, diplomatic, and geopolitical undertaking to revive China's ancient trade routes. Now, it creates an overland belt. Belt is the overland connections, and the maritime road. The maritime connection is called the road, to connect China to over 60 countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. At the same time, making huge investments in their infrastructural developments. That is the BRI in short. An incontrovertible paradigm of history is that a rising power faces resistance from sated entities. When there are established powers and there's a new power rising, there is the potentials of this conflict. Some may see the burgeoning US-China trade war, trade spat in that sense. Philosophically, China has weaved competitions into a dialectical framework in which contradictions between thesis and antithesis may be made to produce a synthesis. The Hegelian dialectics, and the professor and I were talking about it a little earlier on. So a anti-position, a contradictory position is factored into decision-making and feeds into the decision-making, and the synthesis eventually is seen as a positive result of this mixture. However, it is fair to say that the world is wary of this competition, a bit anxious about this competition, and fears that it may follow a pattern of what is known as the Thucydides trap. Now, Thucydides was the Greek historian who had famously said that when Athens grew strong, there was great fear in Sparta, and war was inevitable. In this particular situation, of course, I mean, if you authors like Graham Wallas, who's the American from Harvard who focuses on this study of this concept in contemporary times, says that no, war is not necessarily inevitable, because he does a sort of a study of 26 or so issues and comes to the conclusion that on many it did not come to a conflict, provided these kind of contradictions are factored into the into thinking processes. All eyes will soon be focused on the meeting between the two presidents, Trump and Xi Jinping, in Osaka, which is likely to happen in a couple of days' time. Now, Andre Gunder Frank had once said that the only thing to fear about a rising China is the United States' response to it. Kevin Rudd, the former Australian ambassador, had spoken of an asymmetric balance, a military one in favor of the United States and an economic one in favor of China. Anyhow, the world hopes that while there will be differences between the United States and China, because they are two absolutely distinct paradigms, as if it were, neither side would go into a conflict hoping to win. As the Chinese saying goes, any general's victory is built on the skeletons of 1,000 soldiers. Time was when China was seen as a factor that wanted to change the global system. Today, it has evolved into an entity that believes it can effect changes by working within the system. This explains China's championing of globalization and free trade. Meanwhile, in the meantime, the earlier perceived champion of those values, which is the United States, it appears to have withdrawn into a protectionist cell. But the developing world applauds China for its efforts to lift those societies through such initiatives as the BRI and improve their destiny. China-Bangladesh cooperation is a testimony to that. But I should be derelict in my responsibilities were I not to add that BRI is not without problems. There are partners who fear a rising debt issue. The problems of Hambantota port next door in Sri Lanka comes to mind. But China deserves credit for recognizing this and responding with changes as cooperation progresses. This year in April, there was a second summit in Beijing which studied the implementation of BRI to date, examined these problems, came to the conclusion that this is not something that is one size fits all, and therefore changes would be necessary, and there were adaptations made to this, to the implementation of this idea. The American economist Jeffrey Sachs has described China as the most successful development story in history. At the same time, make no mistake that China is positioning itself pivotally on the globe. The adjustments it makes are actually within the framework of consistency. Its policies resemble a river that meanders but does not suddenly change course. Those who differ from the Chinese are often asked to shelve differences and find common grounds. You make the tactical adjustments in order to achieve the strategic goal. You all know that the first French Revolution had occurred in 1789. Premier Zhou Enlai was once asked on what impact he thought the French Revolution has on history. And he famously replied, "It's too soon to tell." Thank you very much.
First, about Belt and Road Initiative. Lots of questions about this Belt and Road Initiative, particularly about China's motivation. Why did China put forward such a proposal? Why the Belt and Road Initiative now, not in the other time? I think that this is a very legitimate question. I don't need to justify for those pretty positive narrative, but I really like to share you what the scholarly observation about this. I think that we need to understand the driving force of this Belt and Road Initiative, or the motivation. Number one, China is rising, China is growing very strongly. This year marks the 17th anniversary of the founding of People's Republic of China. Also, over 40 years ago, our paramount leader Deng Xiaoping introduced a very famous policy featured with reform and opening up. This policy has transformed China in a very significant way. And though today's China is rising pretty strongly and fast, then a number of questions about this. What China will going to do? Particularly, what China going to use your newfound power, right? In the past, China was weak, was economically backwards, and lagging far behind for comparing with the developed economies. But today, China is emerging very strongly. So people are getting a somewhat kind of a nervous on how China will use your power. Then we, from China, as a Chinese scholar, we heard a lot of also demand calling for China to do more. Here is the say, great power means greater responsibility. Power and responsibility go along with each other. So since China, you become a strong, a new power, you need to demonstrate a greater responsibility. So I think a Belt and Road Initiative is a part of the demonstration how China will use its power. Having said this, I think the fundamental question for China, how should China use its power in a peaceful way, in a constructive way? So this is extremely important. So when China put forward these kind of proposals, not only the Belt and Road Initiative, but also you all are quite familiar with the AIIB, which refers to Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Because China understands perfectly well in Asia, in this part of the world, we have a fundamental challenge. It's the connectivity. It's a connectivity. Let me give you one example. Yesterday evening, we came here. There is no direct flight from Jakarta to Dhaka. I have to transfer at Singapore. This is a question, this is a problem, connectivity. Should there is a direct flight or just a flyover? Come here, and it will save my time. I could have 2 more hours rest for me. And also, probably we don't have the direct flight from Dhaka to Beijing. We have to transfer to Guangzhou and somewhere. So this kind of a connectivity, they are increasingly important. In the last over 20 years, Asia has been the most dynamic economy in the world. However, we should not take it for granted because there is a huge bottleneck for Asia's economy about the connectivity infrastructure building. The point is we confront a huge finance gap. According to the very latest data released by Asia Development Bank, every year, Asia needs $1.7 trillion per year for finance the connectivity here in this part of the world. However, we do our best. We can only accumulate half of them. So there is an enormous gap of this. So what China has done is let's work out this Belt and Road Initiative, and then let's join together to fund the infrastructures, to build bridges, roads, ports, and that will turn our Asia economy into better, more competitive footing for the future. Of course, we have 2 different connectivities. One is a hard connectivity, the other is soft connectivity. Hard connectivity is like roads, bridges, ports, all this. We have seen it clearly. That physically, that need more connectivity. However, equally important is a soft connectivity. That means policy coordination. That means people-to-people engagement. That needs the education, training, exchange. Like today, this kind of symposium, we should compare notes. What you think of that, what I think of that. So this is the soft connectivity to engage with each other. So the fundamental thing for Belt and Road Initiative is, number one, as I said, to conclude China's demonstration of its own responsibility. Secondly, it is a basic In essence, it is a multilateralism approach. Because, please get BRI right. This is not, though it is proposed by China, but it should never be monopolized, dominated by China. It is a public good for Asia, for the rest of the world. That means wide consultation, joint contribution, and mutual benefit. So it is not going to say China to define the Belt and Road Initiative. Bangladesh has a say. All this country has a say. Let's do together because it is joint program. So last April in Beijing, that was just now mentioned about the second Belt and Road Initiative. It turns out to be so successful. So far, over 100 countries and international institutions signed agreement with China. By the way, it is not just a bilateral effort. It is multilateral efforts. If you look at the communiques, the joint statement, that make it crystal clear. That brings me to the second part. What is China's foreign policy towards Asia Pacific? China is a country. Asia Pacific is our home. So we have every reason to cultivate a friendly, benign relationship with our neighbors. There is a saying, you can't choose your neighbor, can you? We got to live with each other in the 1,000 years in the past, in the 1,000 years ahead. And sometimes, be very honest, there is also a saying, to love your neighbor is tougher than to love the human beings, right? Sometimes there are some difficulties and challenges. However, we need to overcome this. Number one issue for China's policy towards its neighbor, we want to be friends, partners of our neighbors. You know how many neighbors China has? And we had 14 neighbors, plus other so-called maritime neighbors, altogether over 20 neighbors. Of course, certainly we regard Bangladesh is our neighbors as well. I served in the United States. My experience in Washington tell me how challenging it is to accommodate, to have a good relationship with your neighbor. Look at today, Americans' relationship with Mexico and with Canada. In Mexico, because of the war, right? You need to build, the government there want to build a wall. But for China, China is not going to build a wall. We're going to build roads and bridges. So it is even theoretically more tougher for China to have a better relationship with our neighbor. However, we did, I think, jointly with our neighbors, we're doing a brilliant job. I think so far, it is fair to say China's relationship with its neighbors in the best ever phase or period. The Korean nuclear issues has been cooling off, and it used to be a very hot spot, very tension. And China's relationship with Japan improved significantly since last year. The two prime ministers, Chinese prime minister pay visit to Japan, prime minister Japan visit to China. And in a few days' time, Chinese president will be in Japan. And so this kind of relationship are just improving. And our relationship with South Asia, as a whole, it is improving very dramatically, let alone our relationship with Pakistan, with Bangladesh, with other South Asia countries. Let me give you one example about China's relationship with India. Last year, China invited India Prime Minister Modi to have an informal summit with President Xi Jinping April last year in Wuhan. It turns out to be a very good summit, very good talk. Right after the Doknan standoff, that was somewhat a crisis out there. However, the two sides managed this relationship in a very constructive way. I'm pretty confident China-India relationship will be greatly improved in the coming months and years. We will see more interaction with each other. Very recently, Xi Jinping met Prime Minister Modi in Central Asia because China and India, we are the member of G20, we are member of the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we are member of BRICS. So a number of multilateral institutions offer the opportunity for the two leaders to meet with each other. And this Belt and Road Initiative started to spread its wing to connect China's neighbors, Euro-Asia continent, together. So this is fundamentally important. Of course, does China has an interest in doing that? Yes, China has an interest. As I said, China has to create a better, favorable, benign external environment so that China can very much focus on its domestic, let's say, challenges. We have lots of domestic agenda we need to do. We have lots of homework, but so we need a better external international environment. Then the third part is about how about China-US relationship. Currently, the escalation of the trade tension between the two countries casts a shadow over the global economy. I think 2 or 3 things should be underscored here. Number one, this year also marks the 40th anniversary of Sino-US relationship, diplomatic relationship. 40 years ago, the two sides started to have a diplomatic relationship. So it's not a long time, it's just 40 years. However, the last 40 years witnessed tremendous development of this bilateral relationship. Today, China is, we are the major trading partner, vice versa. We are the major trading partner of the United States, vice versa, US is our major trading partners. The two people, two economy benefit enormously from this bilateral collaboration. However, recently we have seen the US administration weaponize the tariff against China, and they also threat to add a further tariff on the Chinese goods. Of course, we don't think it is a good idea, because this tariff issue, it is a very diametrical, it's a very damaging to the world economy. First, it will damage the global growth. Huge collateral damage will be caused. Look at the recent data. The IMF, World Bank, WTO, all of them, they have downgraded the forecast of the growth of this year and the next year's economic growth and the trade volume. So none of them has exceptional. All of them are very kind of pessimistic about it. Secondly, this kind of attention will interrupt the global supply chain. China and the US will occupy a very important, crucial global chain. This is a globalized world. We're connected one way or another with each other. So should this global supply chain and the value chain collapse, nobody will be safe. Thirdly, it is important we should get that globalization right. The globalization, over 20 years ago, I heard a great deal of narrative, basically from American and Western friends that say, well, globalization is good, it's a beautiful story. However, today they tend to be very hesitant about it. But now China, we think the globalization is unstoppable. Unstoppable. We confront, together all of us, confront numerous transnational issues and challenges. Climate change, pandemic disease, environmental issue, and also proliferation. None of them is easy to address. It needs collective response. So no single country, no matter how powerful it is, it will not going to address the issue. You need collective, collaborative effort. Secondly, no country can be an island in this world today, because we are already at the very beginning of the fourth industrialization. This is a new round of globalization, driven by artificial intelligence, driven by 5G, big data, all these technologies that will push ahead regardless any kind of resentment from that. This is out. The best way is to get advantage of those things and to have a better connectivity. Then, from this part of the world, there is a saying, particularly from Washington, well, what China doing is going to challenge American supremacy, will replace American as a number one. I don't think that this is an accurate interpretation of China's foreign policy. For me, I did research on China-US relationship in the last over 30 years. My advice, if you ask my advice, I will say to be the leadership of the world is so expensive. I don't think it's a good idea for China to take the role. Not at all. It's very expensive, right? And also, to some extent, it's a thankless job. There should be some sympathy to our American friends, frustrations about that. However, I think for China, the number one driving force for China to rise, to develop, is to take good care of our 1.4 billion people. This is the 1/5 of the world population. I think China and Bangladesh, we share the challenge. How to shelter those people, how to feed those people, how to provide good medical care for them, how to provide education for such a big population. China, has been an enormous challenge. It is the number one agenda to keep our leadership awake. 1.4 billion people. So I think what China has done in the past 70 or over 40 years, China has successfully lifted over 800 million people out of poverty. Xi Jinping promised, made it public, China was going to rule out all the remaining poverty issue in just 2 years' time. This is a very ambitious policy. So the first priority today in China, if you talk to officials, people, has nothing to do with the American. The number one issue is the poverty reduction in China, to your surprise, and also to my surprise. Poverty reduction is the number one issue today in China. So we are very much domestic agenda oriented. Then that brings me the last question, last issue about China, Bangladesh. So Literally, I don't believe China-US relationship should be a zero sum. Lala too, I think we are smart enough, creative enough to recalibrate this relationship, to put it in a more constructive way. A win-win is the only option for China and the US. Then my last part, briefly, I'll also comment on China-Bangladesh relationship. We established this relationship back in 1975. The past has been a good witness how this relationship evolved. And today, I think most important, what shall we do in the future? This should be a future-oriented policy. Your Prime Minister will visit China pretty soon. We're very looking forward to that. And I think two things China and Bangladesh should do together to reinforce this relationship. The number one is to strengthen the collaboration. This collaboration is far more important than we think. If we don't collaborate, if we don't put our joint effort together, then this relationship will not going to be the reflection of our political commitment. There is no question about the political commitment from two sides to this relationship. For China, we particularly value our relationship. Bangladesh, we do see Bangladesh, you have a vision for your future in 2024, in 2040s. The vision is really very ambitious and also very useful for us to understand what Bangladesh we're going to be. However, none of them is easy. You need international collaboration, and China can help. China can like to reach out to our Bangladeshi friends to do more. And in the same time, I think the second thing is, I'm sorry to say as a scholar, at the very beginning, this is my first trip to Bangladesh. It's a shame to me. I visit many places. So that's why I think we got in China a Bangladesh deficit in understanding Bangladesh. We should do more as a scholar, as a medium people. We should do more to promote Bangladesh in China. So I value this opportunity to come to Dhaka, to talk to you and have a conversation. It will be great help to me. Reciprocally, it is also Bangladesh's responsibility, or Bangladesh, I think you should also do more to promote Bangladesh in China. And also let the Bangladesh voice being heard in China. This is very important. When we talk about South Asia, basically talk about India, Pakistan, and they are very important. It is. We can't deny the importance. However, we need more Bangladesh perspective. So I may stop here, and I welcome any kind of comments and questions, and looking forward to our discussion. Thank you for your attention.